You know, for the last couple days, I've had a bit of a back and forth going with somebody on TikTok because they're of the opinion that it is impossible for cis to be considered an insult or a slur because it's a scientific term. My assertion, of course, is that if someone has made it clear to you that they're not comfortable with a label that you're using for them,
but you don't really give a shit and you just use it anyway,
you're insulting them. You've created a slur.
When it comes to insults, an insult can be literally anything at all. There are no particular words that are exempt or that don't qualify, or that could never be considered insults because of particular qualities. There's no rules like that. It could be anything. It's all in how you mean it and how I take it. Did you mean it to be an insult? It's an insult. Did I take it as an insult? It's an insult. And when someone decides to use a word that you've told them you are not comfortable with, that you do not like, they are making a conscious decision to insult you. You making it clear to them that you don't like it marks that word as a derogatory. So much in communication and language relies on intent. What did you mean when you said it? How did they take it when you said it to them? I mean, I could call someone an apple and it's just a fruit. But there's some people that would take being called an apple the wrong way. There are people who would take that as you invalidating their cultural identity. You're saying that they're red on the outside but white on the inside. And it really isn't up to me to decide whether or not they're allowed to be offended by that. But to get back to my back and forth,
he maintains that because cis is a scientific term, I'm not sure that it is, I think it's maybe a gender studies term, but in any case, he says because it's a scientific term that it is impossible for it to be considered an insult. And it just kind of blew my mind because it's just like, you don't know much about the English language, do you? Most of the insults that we've had in the last 20 to 30 to 40 years have been based on scientific terms. Retarded is a medical term, but if you call someone a retard, it's an insult.
The term moron is a scientific term denoting one of low intelligence, but it's a very common insult nowadays. The same goes for imbecile and idiot. Mongoloid is a scientific term, but it's considered an insult.
Homo is another insult, but it just comes from the word for homosexual, which is a scientific term. Tranny is another insult, but it just comes from two more scientific terms, transvestite and transsexual.
The word fat is a descriptive term. It's really just you describing someone's physical condition, but it's definitely an insult if you call somebody fat. Every single one of those insults is based in scientific terminology, and I really don't think that anybody could argue that they're not insults, that they're not shitty things to call people. They're definitely insults. Obviously, that person was just trying to paint themselves a loophole to get out of that, to give them permission to be shitty. They're not acknowledging the fact that language changes, that the meanings of words evolve with how they're used. If you're using it as a slur, it has become a slur. When it comes to the study of language and syntax, there's actually a word for this. It's called pejoration.
The definition of pejoration is this: a change for the worse, depreciation, specifically, an historical process by which the semantic and connotative status of a word tends to decline. In linguistics, pejoration is the downgrading or depreciation of a word's meaning, as when a word with a positive sense develops a negative one. Pronunciation, pejoration, also known as deterioration, degeneration. The etymology is from the Latin worse. Pejoration is much more common than the opposite process, which is called amelioration, to get better. Here are some examples and observations from other writers. The word silly. The word silly is a classic example of pejoration, or a gradual worsening of meaning. In the early Middle English, around 1200, selly, as the word was then spelled, meant happy, blissful, blessed, fortunate, as it did in Old English. The original meaning was followed by a succession of narrower ones, including spiritually blessed, pious, holy, good, innocent, harmless. As the form and pronunciation, selly, changed to silly, in the 1500s, the earlier meanings passed into increasingly less favorable senses, such as weak, feeble, insignificant. By the late 1500s, the word's use declined to its present-day meaning of lacking good sense, empty-headed, senseless, foolish, as in, this is the silliest stuff that I ever heard, in 1595 Shakespeare, A Midsummer Night's Dream.
While I have no doubt that somebody could probably show up in the comments to run an entire argument about how my gender and my skin color and my sexual orientation give me particular advantages in today's society that somehow make me less able to be insulted, in much the same way that my skin color makes me less able to be susceptible to racism, I think at the end of the day, we both know how full of shit that is. The people using slurs, the people engaging in discrimination, aren't generally the people who get to decide if that is a slur or if that is discrimination. That's never been how that works. It's never gonna be how that works, and you can lie to yourself, but the rest of us aren't buying your shit. In the end, it's really not that complicated. You just have to not be a fucking asshole. Don't call people names. Or at the very least, if you are gonna call people names, own it. Try to be a good person. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. You know, treat people the way you want to be treated. Try to help more people than you hurt as you go throughout your day-to-day business. It doesn't have to be complicated, just don't be a dick.